What's up guys, Daniel Savage here, and in this video, in this little lesson, I will be teaching you guys about supply and demand zones. I do have a sore throat, so forgive me if I do take a little cough break or drink a little bit of water, but I'm going to make this as quick as possible because it is as simple, it is really simple. Basically, these supply zones and these demand zones, they're very needy, and they're forms of support and resistance. I like to use these zones to find my overall targets, and I like to use these zones to scalp. So for example, right here, let's jump straight into this. This Fibonacci short that we did take, it's in my Fibonacci section of my course. We sold right here. Barely any drawdown. So if we would have used our supply and demand zones, which is this right here, we could have targeted that as a overall take profit for 130 plus pips. And how you identify these zones are basically on the 4 hour. So the bottoms are basically the demand zones and the tops are basically the supply zones. So let's label them. And how you find these zones is the same way you find your support and your resistance. So let's label them. So since we're at the top right now, guys, write this down in your notes. Since we're at the top, we're going to label this our supply zone. So supply will always be our tops, and demands will always be our bottoms. Say that a million times so that way you don't get confused. I just say supply and demand zone. So right here we have our demand zone. Actually, I know let's copy that just because I know we're going to be pasting that. So basically, if we go into our 1 hour sell on this Fibonacci short that we did take, we could have seen that this 4 hour demand zone came back for another high five, I guess you can say. And that's why I like to scalp these, because these prices will come back eventually to come and retest these zones, as you can see. So if you would have used this as an overall target for 130 plus pips right here, you guys could have done what I do. And what I do is I'm a very aggressive scalper. So since I'm a very aggressive scalper, I used this demand zone right here to get in a position right here the second it started rejecting. And I would have scalped this with a 40 pip stop loss. Well, I'll be honest with you guys, between 40 and 50 pips always on a scalp. Risky business, but good money. So let's just put 50 pips, just because it's a pretty wide zone. So you always want to have at least a 1.1 ratio on this type of scalp. So as you guys can see, we did hit the zone and we did open, and boom, 50 pips. So you can catch these back-to-backs. Also, right here, this was our 4 hour. Let's just move this over here. This was our 4 hour supply zone. And as you guys can see, like I said, these are very needy zones. They're like supply and resistance zones, but they're very needy. The price will always have a way to find itself right back there. So right here, we had, boom, a rejection, and we just flooded 100 plus pips, 150 plus pips. So if you would have sold the minute that this thing started rejecting, like let's say right here with our 40-50 pip stop on this scalp with our 1.1 ratio, you could have rode this thing down to our other zone, which would be our demand zone, for 186 pips. Literally. These zones are very needy, and you'll realize after doing some back testing and taking some notes how you can manipulate the market in your favor. So let's go back for another example. This right here is a supply zone from all the way over here from September 20th. And this is a supply zone from October 3rd. So since we broke up past this, we broke right through, and just like basically a supply, basically like a resistance and a support zone, we could have scalped this right here the minute it started rejecting. Same as here. Barely touched it. Like I said, guys, you always want to wait for that little retest. So we could have gotten on the sell, like let's say right here, with our 40 to 50 pip stop, and target the next zone for 135 pips. So I'm not sure if you guys are catching me or if you guys are with me, but these zones, they're very needy. Very, very needy. This is a demand zone from, very, very long time ago. Literally September 9th. And it got touched again 3 weeks later. 2 to 3 weeks later. So on our 4 hour, this was our demand zone. And as we got closer to it, we did have a nice little kiss and rejection. Remember, no retest, no valid entry. We could have got in here, 40, 50 pip scalp, and look at that. Straight into profit. So you guys can use these zones to manipulate the market in your favor, to scalp and use them as overall targets. So let me find another example of using these zones to find overall targets. Here's a nice little example. Boom. Fibonacci short in our zone for the sell of 140 pips. So you guys will see this a lot. I only drew a few little zones on our 4 hour. You can also draw these on the 1 hour, but I just feel like they're so much more like accurate when it comes to scalping them and targeting them on the 4 hour with your 1 hour analysis than anything. So you guys can find these zones. For example, this would be a 1 hour zone that you could have scalped. Put that dark. The minute that we broke through and retested, look at that. Shot straight into profit. 100 plus pips. Like, you guys can use these zones in Confluence. Same way you use them as support and resistance, but you can do a lot more with these. And thank you guys for watching. Any questions, you guys can always feel free to hit me up on Instagram, send me a DM, send me a message, reach out to me. Thanks, guys.